Our social cognition is what we observe, process, and think about others and the world around us. Social cognition is what we use to form our first impressions. Because of our ever-increasing web-based world, studies have been done which look at the impact of online first impressions as opposed to face-to-face first impressions. It seems there is consistency in our first impressions whether we meet a person in life or online. Our culture feeds our perceptions. Culture involves how a person lives, speaks, and interacts with others. Our perception of self and others will be based on our own culture. For example, if the culture we live in sees very specific roles for men and women, we may experience anxiety if we want to go outside of those roles. In regards to others, if our culture is predominantly one particular religion, we may perceive someone of a different religion in a negative way. Because of bounded rationality, humans only have a limited time and ability to take in information that helps them form their first impressions. Because of this, we naturally default to our own cultural norms when perceiving ourselves and others. Perceptions most definitely vary across cultures. It can be something as simple as a phrase or a gesture that means one thing in one culture, but something completely different in another culture. Cultural misperception can lead to laughter if it's resolved, but if not, these misperceptions can lead to resentment or even worse. I decided to compare and contrast the country of Saudi Arabia with America. I selected this country, quite frankly, because I was unaware of any positive cultural elements. I was sure I was simply uninformed, and I wanted to correct that. Let's take a look at life in Saudi Arabia. Equality is a very strong ideology in this culture. Religion and society are closely linked, and this helps maintain control over the culture. Theft is rare, assault and murder are limited, mostly having to do with honor killings and revenge. Deviant behavior brings disgrace to the family, and disgrace to the family is considered a sin. Therefore, deviant behavior is very minimal. The justice system is based on what's called Sharia law. There is often a physical punishment component of this judicial system, and this punishment, this physical punishment, is often carried out in public. This public display of punishment is something that brings shame onto one's family, and oftentimes the shame is much more painful than the actual physical punishment. There is strict gender segregation. Women are allowed to work outside the home, but they must not come in contact with any unrelated males. Because of this, about 7% of the formal workforce is female. Men have far more rights than women, and very recently women were finally given the right to drive. Men and women rarely act outside domestic spaces. Most marriages are still arranged, and they are often between paternal cousins. Much of the child rearing is left to domestic help. Do's and don'ts are part of every culture. Saudi Arabia is no different. Their list of don'ts is rather extensive, and here are a few. Do not ever discuss sex, politics, or Israel. Do not ever discuss anything that could cause embarrassment. Never say anything against God, and interestingly, this includes the God of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. never drink alcohol, which, because alcohol consumption is illegal in Saudi Arabia, that is not as much of an issue as it would be in America. Do not gamble. Do not discuss death or anything regarding bad luck. It's important never to consume any pork products, and never at any time is anyone to be critical of the royal family. Some other social taboos are rather interesting. One of them is, it is never good to arrive on time to a social call. It's best to arrive 30 minutes late. Never backbite. It is very frowned upon. Do not stare at women. Never point at anyone. It's important to always keep your hand flat and gesture. Do not show the soles of your shoes. Always greet elders and stand when they enter a room. And you never refuse an offer of Arabic coffee and dates. I came across many surprising facts when studying the culture of Saudi Arabia. I did not know that they had a strong ideology of equality in this culture. Poverty is almost non-existent. Child rearing is left up to domestic staff. Older people are highly honored. Polite behavior is prevalent. Relationships between generations is extremely formal. The divorce rate is very high. The remarriage rate is very high also, mostly among the male population. This research has changed my perspective of the culture in Saudi Arabia. True, it is very different in many aspects from American culture, but there are many positive elements I was unaware of. While I'm morally opposed to the practice of Sharia law and a bit confused about their egalitarian ideology, yet men and women are far from equal, I appreciate this culture's low poverty rate, low crime rate, and great respect for religious practices. My Christian faith tells me these people are also children of God, and His desire is for them to come under His wing. The best way for them to do this is through the kindness of God. Understanding their culture helps me to understand them, respect them and their way of life, and accept them just as Christ has accepted me.